Morocco is known for its beauty, its rich history, and even for luxury. But for many Black travelers, belonging isn't always guaranteed. But one woman is changing that narrative. Meet Meryanne Loum-Martin, the first Black woman to own a boutique hotel in Morocco. She saw a gap, a need for a more intimate, intentional hotel experience. So after launching a successful private hotel concept, she made a bold move. She left behind a lucrative career as a lawyer in France, relocated to Marrakech, and in 2001 launched Jnane Tamsna, now one of the most sought-after boutique hotels in North Africa. Against the odds, Jnane Tamsna has risen to global prominence, hosting high-profile guests like Hugh Jackman, Yvonne Orji, and so many more. But beyond the beautiful architecture, striking design, and celebrity clientele, Jnane Tamsna has become a haven for the African diaspora, a gathering place for Black travelers from around the world, and a space that fosters connection through thoughtfully curated events and experiences for people of color. So in this episode of Black and Borderless, we sit down with Meryanne to understand, what does it take to be a pioneering entrepreneur in a country that's not your own? How does a boutique hotel become a cultural oasis for the diaspora? And what does it actually mean to belong in a world of cultural ambiguity? Find out on this episode of Black and Borderless. We're excited about this conversation, talking about Jnane Tamsna, which is this hotel, which is a pioneer in hospitality space in Marrakech, and also talking about kind of how you established the hotel and how you made history as being a Black woman owner in the Marrakech hospitality scene. So let's get right into it.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to meet you, even if it's virtually, until we meet for good. And I'm very happy to answer your questions.
Let's walk back before you actually established Jnane Tamsna. So you're living in France. This is late 80s, sometime in the 90s.
Well, I used to be a lawyer in Paris, and I was always passionate about architecture. And I had my baccalaureate, which is like A levels, 2 years in advance, and I went straight to architecture school. And I couldn't get, even though I had good grades in everything that mattered, I couldn't get into third year because of minor credits in math, physics, and chemistry, and I'm totally hopeless in science. So I had to stop, and I went to to law school, and everything was going very well as a lawyer. My plan B, I'm fourth generation lawyer on my mother's side and second on my father's side. And at some point before Jnane Tamsna, my parents, one was from Guadeloupe, my mother was from Guadeloupe, my father from Senegal, wanted to have a holiday house in a place which would not be further than 3 hours flight from Paris. And Marrakech was very famous in Paris because Yves Saint Laurent was there and a lot of other people who were the kind of people who could choose anywhere in the world and were famous for their taste. So, a very good friend of mine had a house and was part of the first circle of Yves Saint Laurent. And he had a house here, and I would see him once a week in Paris. And I told my parents that since I was a frustrated architect, if they were serious about this project, I wanted to be in charge. And they told me, okay, go and check Marrakesh. We didn't know it. See what it looks like and if it's possible to acquire land. So I came in December 85 to look for land, fell in love with the place, came back with them. I had identified a piece of land, came back with them in January 86, and off started my first project in Marrakesh, which was supposed to be a holiday house for the family. But I was coming every month, and I would always come with two or three friends because I had lived in several countries and I had friends everywhere. And my friends knew that I was going to Marrakesh once a month. And I was listening to what they were saying. I was on my construction site and seeing my friends in the evening. And they were always saying, Marrakesh has this kind of legend aura about this amazing culture, etc. And when you were coming in the 80s as a tourist, if you didn't know people, you wouldn't get it and you would never come back. And it was a place, apart from one magnificent old hotel, well, fabulous, called La Mamunia. Um, it was a place where you had corporate hotels without any charms and huge places. So you were coming with the expectation of discovering a culture, and you were in quite boring spaces.
Mhm.
And so I had the idea to create. I could identify a niche,
Mhm.
and I had the idea to create a very unusual type of hospitality product, which would be like a property which was way beyond a villa rental. It was like having a mini hotel to yourself, but it was a buyout. So I convinced my father to buy the land next door and to do another property and to create an experience about the culture, which no one was offering because people could not, we had 12 bedrooms. So people could not do this when they have a hotel of 150 bedrooms. So we curated a kind of quite spectacular, I have to say, experience. And the first guest was Brad Pitt. And then it never stopped being packed, packed, packed. And people would buy a super luxury inclusive package. And then there would never be any question of money, and I was still a lawyer in Paris. I would just come from time to time, and I had trained the staff. They knew what they had to do, and they were creating everyday surprises for the guests. And
Mhm.
one day the lunch there, one day the dinner there, and one day a picnic there. And they would arrive to a picnic site where the furniture were there, and there were musicians waiting for them. And I mean, it was just like a dream. And we had the incredible luck. It was before we opened in 1990, and it was before, social media and all of that, but we had a press like no other property had, and we had a word of mouth of very, very powerful people. So it was so busy that my mother would call me exasperated and say, "So tell me, what are you doing? When can I go on holidays in my house?" you know and I would look at the agenda and tell her, "Maybe in 7 months, maman, there's 3 nights available, don't miss your flight."
Mhm.
And to tell you how busy it was, Tom Cruise tried 4 times before we could find space for him. And it was fax time. I was still a lawyer in Paris, and when I was coming, home in the evening, there would be faxes all over. And, I remember one day his assistant called, and she said, "Well, I have to ask you a question because for 4 times we couldn't come. So do you know who he is?" And I answer, "But do you know who we have?" And then I listed people who are 10 times as important, if not more.
More
And
famous than Tom Cruise.
European royals and very famous CEOs and etcetera. And so I told her, "Well, he'll just have to choose, I'm sorry, or to wait." And then he came on the 5th time. So when people say that I'm the first Black person in hospitality here, it's not true. I'm the first, period. Because when I opened in 90, there were no men, no women, no white person, no Black, nothing. You had only had these big hotels, and you had one villa to rent, which was nice, but you had no one having bridged the gap between hospitality and a boutique concept.
Yeah, glad you cleared that up because yes, the narrative I saw out there when search out or was conducting research before this interview was that you were the first Black woman. But what you've described here is an even greater feat, which is becoming just the first boutique hospitality space,
Concept, yeah.
in Marrakech. Um,
Mhm.
and obviously the first Black one, but the first
Yes,
ever in that case.
yes,
So I'm
yeah.
just curious. So, you mentioned that Brad Pitt was your first guest. How did Brad Pitt even hear about this, what was essentially your family vacation house at that time?
I don't remember because to launch the concept, I did a big party for 1989, 1990, New Year's Eve.
Mhm,
And it was costumed party with the theme Oriental Splendor. And I had made a magnificent big collage. It was still paper and not digital. And people were receiving it from California to all the countries in Europe where I had friends and New York. And it was handwritten at the end of this magnificent collage. Even if you have flown 15 hours and you're not costumed, you can't come in. The party was absolutely beyond my wildest expectations because my friends living in Paris or in Vienna went to the opera and they rented costumes from opera, and there's a lot of oriental themes, you know. And then my friends living in LA went to the Paramount studio and they rented costume from Sif of Baghdad, etc., etc. And so this really created a buzz. And also, all my friends had access to the boss of the company they were working, and they were the boss and they said, "Oh, you know, we know that you're always looking for a place to entertain the management or your best clients, and we're coming from an extraordinary experience, and your assistant should have the contact of our friend." And that's how it started. So I guess that he heard about it because there were also some French journalists at the party, you know? And so and then it was and the thing that we would do and excel at doing is absolutely protect the privacy of the guest. No one knew who was staying with us, but we had a magnificent guest book, and it was a time where people would also, take Polaroids and glue Polaroid of them with the staff in the guest book, or they would draw in there. And so people on site could see who had come. And then we started having a lot of press. And in the press, the journalists could browse through the guest book, and then they were allowed to mention people. But I would never tell any journalist, "Oh, this one just left," you know.
So you gave celebrities that kind of exclusivity that they yearn for when they're out and about.
Yeah.
So you have this basically it's a vacation house turned boutique hotel experience. It's attracting all of these celebrities, but as you said, you're still working as a lawyer in France. So
Yep.
at what point do you decide? And I would imagine you were making a pretty good living working as a lawyer in France. At what point do you decide, you know what, I want to take this to the next level? This vacation home is doing so well that I want to somehow expand this and build something even bigger. And also, I want to move to Marrakech myself.
So in I was very depressed because I lost my mother in 94 and in 95, and I really felt like changing life. And at the same time, we had horrendous strikes in Paris. Paris is a champion. France can be a champion for horrendous strikes. And we decided to leave in 95. And by the time our son had finished his little school, the following summer in 96, we moved to Marrakech as a trial. And we never left. And now it's been like 40 years. And oh, 30 years? 30 years. And I also wanted to do a project of my own. And I developed another project for my father when I was here, which was also a smashing success and a different concept. And but I was obsessed with having and the projects I developed for my father stopped in 2004, family issues. And so I wanted to have a place of my own, of our own. And in 2000 I bought the land here. We bought the land, and in 2001 we built and opened Jnane Tamsna for this New Year's Eve 2001.
Wow. What was that feeling, right? Because you said even then, when you moved to Marrakech, it was a try, right? You weren't you were still kind of in the testing out phase. Why was that? Were you scared leaving, kind of your cushy job in France? Why was it just a try at that point?
Well, because I was I had never lived in a kind of small town, even though I had always dreamt. I remember telling my friends when I was in my 20s, one day I live in the countryside, and people were making, "Pff, are you crazy? There's no you without a social urban life, you'll be dead," you know? And the social urban life we I have created for ourselves here. We have the most fantastic life in Marrakesh in terms of social opportunities, in terms of everything that can be done here. And there's a lot of things happening with art, and it is really wonderful, really wonderful.
Well,
And I organize my own events,
mhm.
and we have turned our hotel into a cultural space.
Yeah,
So it is true that, I just cross the garden, and our house is on the property, and I just cross the garden and go to a hotel, and I meet the most phenomenal people.
yeah, yeah. So back then, there was still you didn't know obviously what you know now about how you would experience the place. So there was still a little bit of hesitation, like, okay, yes, coming from a big cosmopolitan place like I would imagine Paris at that time, and moving to Marrakech, which was considered a much smaller non-cosmopolitan place. So now you start Jnane Tamsna in 2001,
2001.
and tell me about those kind of first early days, that first year of trying to establish this, because this is like a different ballgame.
I think that deep down, I sometimes I'm invited to speak to MBA students, and I always tell them I'm the worst example, because I don't do business plan. I follow my intuition.
Mm,
And you can follow your intuition if you're doing things at a small scale, like I do. If I was doing like a huge project, then I would have to go with a business plan. Um, but I knew that it was going to work, because if I felt that I was creating a project that I would like to, that the way I wanted to travel, and I'm not alone in the way I think. So the same way I knew this thing, that the concept I was putting together for my parents' property, I knew that it was fitting an expectation. Whether this expectation was clear in people's mind or not, I knew it was there.
mhm,
And it is the same thing with Jnane Tamsna. I knew it was also going to correspond to an expectation.
mhm.
And it has been. And last week, someone has left, and she's at her 49th stay here.
Wow.
She's based in Colorado. She takes people traveling around, discovering culture and food and lifestyle. And we decided to work together on September 11th, 2001. We had an appointment then.
Wow.
We didn't know that the world was going to collapse that same morning. And that evening, we said, we don't know where the world is going, but we're going to give it a try. And she started coming with, two, three people from 2002, and coming every year, twice or even three times. And her groups now are, 16, 18, 20 people.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And then we have another one who is based in Florida, and she just discovered us 2 years ago, and she's at her fourth trip, and she brings 23, 24 people also.
Wow.
Yeah, so we do a lot of, individual bookings, small groups, usually very sophisticated, and always, in fact. We do some seminars, and we do a lot of big parties, like big weddings and things like that. So the family, it's just like their property in Morocco, and they can have 250 guests
Mhm,
flying in from all over the world, or
mhm.
sometimes 300.
Yeah.
And the parties are here, just like if you were going to someone's home, you
Yeah.
know?
And
And we host a couple and their best friends.
I love boutique hotels that operate that way. Like recently, about 2 years ago, I celebrated my 40th birthday in the Grill in Jamaica, and that's exactly what we did. We found a boutique hotel that could, hold or accommodate 15, 20 people. And we basically, it was like our large Airbnb, so to speak, right? Because we kind of
Wow.
occupied
Yeah.
all the rooms. I think people are craving that a lot more. Yes, resorts are nice, but you are one of many, and there's not that kind of feeling of intimacy that you have with your group or your travel group. So as
Yes.
travel, as group travel becomes, more popular, I think people are craving hotels that feel like homes where all their guests can live there. Everyone can have a separate room and have their privacy, but the space feels like it belongs basically to your travel group, and that's what I'm getting from kind of the experience of, of Jnane Tamsna, that's kind of the same feel, a boutique hotel that feels like a big home that you're living.
Exactly, exactly. Even though we have several buildings spread on 10 acres,
Mhm.
it really feels like a private estate.
Yeah.
And we grow our own food, and the staff is super nice, and We have at some seasons we have families with the children, and last Easter all of the rooms were people who have been coming since they were always teenagers of 18, and all these kids have been coming since they were 2 or 3 years old.
Wow.
So many people were just there for the fifth time, the sixth time, the fourth time. It
Yeah.
was really wonderful. And this is very gives a lot of satisfaction, that people really like your place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The customer loyalty seems to be
Yes.
through the roof. Let's talk about going back again to those early days. I really want to sit in that space a little bit because I think it's very important for people to realize that you didn't just get here overnight. You didn't build customer loyalty overnight, right? Was there a time, in those first few years where you faced a challenge in, developing or even operating this boutique hotel? And did it make a time that you kind of questioned if you made the right decision, and how did you handle that?
Well, I never questioned if I had made the right decision, but I questioned in terms of timing, because after September 11th, for like 2 years, in my parents' property, we were packed with Americans, back to back, back to back.
Mhm,
And then I was just thinking, I will take the overflow to start my business. And then there was no overflow. There was no one anywhere because people are afraid to travel. And my husband used to go to England a lot. And he told me, English people are not worried about traveling because, they grew up with IRA and some sense of things can happen much much more than Americans. And he told me, okay, so he was not very involved in the business. He's much more now. But he said, okay, since I go to England, I will try to see if there's some people interested in Jnane Tamsna. And he found it was at a moment where I was really scratching my head because I had, bank installments. I had a lot of pressure on my shoulders.
yeah.
And he found a company. It was a company which was organizing very specific wellness retreats for people from the city mostly. It was a time where the city in London was booming, people had big bonus, etc., etc. And this company was taking 12 to 13 trips a year here,
Mhm, mhm.
you know, and the one company saved us.
Wow.
And on top of that, between this company, then we had regular business, but this company, made us being able to pay the bank with 2 years in advance. So we always had to be inventive, find solutions. But it is true that there's some moments which have not been, and I'm working on new projects, and it's never easy. It is never easy.
I think that's a remarkable story because I was going to ask about that, right? Opening a hotel in 2001, you know, I'd assume right before September 11th hit. And you've
We
answered that.
sorry, we opened 3 months of we opened in December,
Oh, so
2001.
it's even so you opened after the
Yes,
9/11. Oh,
yes.
so that's
So
so it
we
wasn't even
were
like you
just
have
like
time to.
the desert.
Wow,
There was no business at
wow,
all.
wow, wow,
And I was in a big pressure to open because and in fact, I built Jnane Tamsna in the probably a world record of 11 months and 3 weeks from scratch.
wow.
Because 18 months before, December 2001, regular clients of my parents' property had a lovely French family had told me that they wanted to rent that property for New Year's Eve 2001 because they needed to do a family reunion. And I told them, oh, for New Year's Eve, it's years in advance that you have to book, so it's too late. And they told me, yeah, but we heard you bought some land. And I said, yes, it's just covered with palm trees. There's nothing else. And they said, well, in 18 months, we trust you. Here's a deposit. We're sure the house will be finished. And silly me, I accepted because I was so sure I could do the project in 18 months. And then there were various delays. And uh, because it's by miracle that I could find my the previous business was doing so well that I thought that I would have no problem to find finance,
Mhm.
because I was feeding 3 banks here with foreign currency every week,
Yeah.
and at my little scale, the proportion was probably bigger than anything else,
Yeah.
and none of them wanted to finance me when I needed them,
Mhm.
and I I was in trouble because I owned the land, but I needed, to raise, debt to build the hotel, and by miracle, I remembered a guest who had stayed in my parents' house and had left a letter for me a year before. And he had been named at the head of a big French bank here. And he said, I've traveled the world and this has been the most extraordinary experience in my life. So please come to see me if you need to do a new project in Morocco. And because I was doing, feeding these banks, I didn't think I would need it. And I just put this in a drawer. And when all these banks I had been feeding for years said, no, no, we're not sure about your project, I remembered that letter. I was praying my mother all the time, please help me, please help me. But flash, I remembered this letter. Second miracle, I find it. And then I called the headquarters of this bank in Casablanca to check if he's still there. And they gave me his private office fax. We were still under fax time. And wrote to him, and he called me back 30 minutes later.
Wow.
And he said, "Of course, I would love to meet you. And I happen to be coming to Marrakech next week with several of the managers of the bank. We'll come to see you." And I remember very well, I explained to him why I thought that the new thing was going to be what I was doing. And it was the evolution of the product that he had lived.
Mhm.
And I did the whole presentation and I had the planning consent and everything to show them. And at the end, he said to his other directors, gentlemen, if there's someone who knows what she's talking about in this field, it's this lady. So we're going to look at the figures and we're going to finance.
Wow.
And that was a miracle who opened the door to finance in for Jnane Tamsna. And then I thought I was going to start. And I had found a good contractor. And the day we are like 16 months before these guests are coming. And the coincidence. I go to Paris like every 2 or 3 months, and I would never bump into these people until the moment I had accepted their deposit. I
Yeah.
would always bump into one of them at an opening, at a taxi station, and they would always say, "Oh, how is the house coming up?" And I was struggling among the palm trees. There was nothing, and I would always tell them, "Oh, it will be ready. It will be ready." And then we are like 16 months, and I'm writing my first check to the contractor I trusted. And I get a call from an American guy who is building also in Marrakech. And he tells me, Marianne, I've heard that you're going to work with this contractor. Be careful because he's filing for bankruptcy.
Wow.
So fortunately, I had not given him a penny, but here I am without a contractor. And then I'm looking for someone I can trust. This one already, I'm looking for, and I'm not finding someone I want to do this project with.
Mhm.
And then I find someone, and then Ramadan was starting, and I am the most unpleasant person on a construction site. And I remember my husband would tell me, I don't even want to get near you on a construction site. And so I didn't want to be my mean self over people who were fasting. So I waited until the end of Ramadan. And on January 6th, 2001, the grounds had like 200 workers digging. And January 6th, and the same year, December 27th, we had our clients and the house was ready.
Wow.
Yeah, but I think that my white hair started coming then.
Well, that is a remarkable story. I mean, I'm not sure how bigger hotels or hotel chains like the Hilton and the Marriott take to basically put up a full hotel. And again, with 24 rooms, right? At this time in 11.
Well, yeah, but I needed to focus on half of it, the first building.
Mhm.
So we dug everything, we started everything, and then I focus on the main building that they were taking over, and the rest I finished in 15 months, which is not bad. But this first building I finished in 11 months and 3 weeks.
Wow.
What helped a lot is that I do everything myself. I was my own architect,
Mhm.
and I was also the my own interior designer. So there's no delay because I know when I'm drafting a room, I know what I'm going to put in it. And I had started buying furniture and textiles. I did everything at the same time.
Wow. Did you sleep? I mean, I guess is the question, right? So you're trying to get this, at least the first half of the hotel done for these clients that you've already taken a deposit for. You're the one seeking capital for it. You're, over construction sites. Was there ever a point that you asked yourself, like, why, why am I doing this to myself? Or were you kind of running off passion? You know.
No, I love designing and I love creating. So, but it was very stressful. When we finished, our son was what? He was 11, and he told me, "Mama, I need to speak to you." He's 35 now. And he said, "Now you have to promise the family that never again you will accept clients before building the hotel." And I realized what pressure it has been on the whole family, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Every entrepreneur has a story like that when they took a risk that even like in retrospect they asked themselves, how did I even accept that? But it worked out in your favor, as we can see many years later.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about Jnane Tamsna as a cultural space. But before we go there, I think we take a moment in the beginning to talk about you, and we like to take a moment in the beginning to talk about kind of who Meryanne is as a person, right? And you've had a pretty eclectic, culturally eclectic life, to say the least, right?
Yeah.
You're born in Ivory Coast, so Senegalese diplomat father, and
He was a lawyer then.
who was a lawyer then. I say he's a lawyer back then. So you're born to a Senegalese lawyer and a West Indian mother, and
Lawyer.
also a lawyer. Wow. So you had two parents who were both parents were lawyers. You spent time, growing in Ghana, London,
Yes.
Moscow, before finally settling in Paris. Growing up, and even now as an adult, have you ever had an identity crisis of any sort?
No, because I was very lucky to have to live in circles where I was never bullied, never in a position of prejudice. Even though I grew up in a white world, I was always everywhere. I was the only black person since I was, I don't know, 6 or 7. And I never had an issue because it helps, to be in a position where you're not a migrant in a difficult situation, where you're coming from an educated background without financial issues, and you're also a very good student.
Mhm.
So I never had an identity crisis. I remember that zillion times people would ask me, "How does it feel to not have? I mean, how does it feel not to be at ease everywhere? Don't you feel the need to be 100% something?"
Yeah.
And I said, "No, because I'm not 100% something anyhow. So why would I feel, I don't know what it is. And I feel sorry for people who are reduced in only being 100% something, you
Yeah.
know? My mother was Catholic, my father was Muslim, I'm Catholic. There was such a constant, uh, how would you say, cosmopolitan mood and spirit in everything I lived in since I was a child, that I don't know something else.
Yeah.
So it was never an issue.
Wow. That's remarkable and that's unique because people often, I'm as a bicultural child myself, I went through a phase where I was kind of trying to figure out what my voice was. So I think it's pretty remarkable to hear someone who from the onset was pretty comfortable in their pluralism, if so to speak, in this kind of pluralistic identity. And actually living in all those places and occupying them fully without feeling like an alien, so to speak. But
Yeah.
I do kind of wonder, did one place of all places you lived in, did any place feel most like home to you? Like which place when you think of what is home to you in your head?
The thing is that my conception of home, for example, could be Marrakech, but it's definitely Marrakech in a way. But I'm not Moroccan. I'm not Muslim. I don't speak Arabic. So it's home, the home I have chosen, but it cannot be 100% ownership. You know, um, Paris is very close to that. Uh, but at the same time, it's so much part of me, and my mentality is always to look for something different. That but Paris is home. My mother is buried in Paris. My great grandfather was sitting in Congress. He was a congressman and a lawyer too. I mean, our roots in Paris go since the First World War,
Yeah,
and my grandparents are buried there. So it's Paris is really my family place, I would say.
yeah,
My home. I'm French. But I don't mind having a portion of ownership of identities all mixed together. And you see, for example, my kids are even more mixed because their father, on their grandmother's side, their second boat after Mayflower, and on their grandfather's side, my mother-in-law was hilarious. She was Protestant, of course, and until the morning of her wedding, she told me that she didn't know if her father would come because she was marrying a Catholic, and
wow.
in the U.S. at this time, you would not do that.
Mhm.
You see, so my kids are coming from rebels. I would do say on both sides because my mother confronted something unusual also for her. She married a Muslim and she was Catholic, and she was West Indian and he was from Senegal. They met in Paris in law school. And on the other side, my late mother in law also said, I don't care about what people do. I'm marrying the one I want, you know?
Yeah,
So I remember that one day my daughter was had to fill a form. She must have been 12 or 13, and she said, "You know what? I filled everything
mhm.
because I'm everything." So she filled white, black, Christian, whatever. She filled everything, and she said, "I can claim everything," and that's the way I am.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, as much as we're laughing about it, there are people who claim everything because they are everything, and and they're proud of all the things that come and making them, and they know that it wasn't by accident that they were born this way, right? I think I came to terms with that at some point, that it's not by accident. Instead of trying to fit into the Black American box or to fit into the Cameroonian box, I realized that my identity was this kind of beautiful mixture of both, and that was by design by God, if I'm gonna get spiritual, right? It wasn't by accident that I was born that way. My mother could have met someone else at a different time, my father could have met someone else, but somehow God saw it fit to bring these 2 people together from 2 different worlds, and so there's nothing more intentional like that, I think, from, from a higher power than to create bring people together who aren't even in the same sphere together to
Yeah.
create a new life. So, um it's become my superpower, and that's what is I'm not to put words in your mouth, but that's kind of what I'm hearing as well, which is that not only is it who you are, it's actually your superpower, this kind of plurality that you live in or that you represent, you know?
Yeah, yes, I was very lucky to see it like this because from time to time I can bump into someone who's the opposite. And on my side it has built confidence, but on other people it had built the opposite. And this is from this confidence also that I had the idea to create the Diaspora Salon,
Mhm,
you know?
mhm. I think that's a great segue because that's where I was going next, right? So we've talked about, Jnane Tamsna as this beautiful boutique hotel, visited by celebrities, but I think it's holding a really an even more, I would say, meaningful place in society right now, which is that it's become this kind of cultural haven for people. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Ways in which you've made this hotel more than just a luxe boutique experience, but a place where people of color especially can come and feel safe and feel like they belong. So let's talk about that. Let's start with the Diaspora Salon, which is this event that you now hold at the hotel. Tell us about what exactly it is and why you decided to create it.
So before I was involved with the diaspora, our hotel was already a cultural space because we created because we live on site, as I told you, and we want to have an interesting life, and we're not in this to sell room nights. So we always created, writers retreats. We had the most fascinating authors coming here for years, etc. And then the business was entirely white until 5 years ago. And I was wondering, where are the people looking like me? And then I had a story in Essence magazine. And then the impact on the revenue of the hotel was plus 60% the following year. And I started looking and I started, looking at the figures, and I realized that the Black leisure travel market is huge. It averages now 145 billion a year, with 20% going international. The rest is domestic and probably Mexico and Caribbean. And I thought, oh my God! But I could see it because I could see the figures, the impact on our hotel. And then I go to the vineyard in August, Master's Vineyard in August. And as you know, I call it Wakanda in August, because you have all these fabulous, fun, wonderful African Americans. And then I go to these amazing events, amazing parties, and the level of brilliance is phenomenal. And I'm always the only non American. And then I go to parties in France, I mean, in the Black diaspora in Europe, and the same thing. I would go to a place where everyone is Senegalese and you would not see a Cameroonian, an Ivorian, or anything else. So I started realizing that this was really continuing the game of the oppressor, which had silos, created silos for Black communities, making sure they would never meet. Because when we meet, then we develop things together and we're stronger and we empower each other. So I said, this is just insane that I know people in all these communities and I have a hotel. So let's start creating a platform for Black excellence across the diaspora. And also, the next step is to give access to young students from HBCUs so they can mingle with Black excellence for 4 days. Because we had done an event like this in the past before the Diaspora Salon, and the impact, we sponsored 6 students to come from, HBCUs in like Morehouse, etc. And they were students who had not only never traveled, but for some of them, first generation going to college and only sibling going to college
Wow.
because the other sibling had jobs which didn't need college education.
Mhm.
And I remember one of them being interviewed at the end of the event. It was a writer's retreat around a Black Pulitzer Prize. And he said that being surrounded by Black people of this caliber for the first time in his life, in a place owned and designed by a Black woman, had changed the trajectory of his life.
Wow.
So this is also the thing about the Diaspora Salon is that there's a level, all the people coming here, last time we were about 140 people for 4 days, and phenomenal speakers. So the speakers stay at the hotel and the other people stay wherever they want, but they come all day and evening here. And it's achievers who need and are happy to be in this phenomenal house party concept. It's not a conference with badges and no,
Mm.
just like a party, except that it's a party with a lot of intellectual content and conversation. And the idea is that people have all stayed in touch. They see each other. Some people, I'm very happy to learn that a Nigerian who is doing really interesting cosmetics is trying to develop products with American Jamaican from New York who is also doing interesting cosmetics. I'm very happy to know that an international lawyer, an American who is based in Paris, is now hiring the most brilliant mind in artificial intelligence, who was one of the speakers. And so the idea is to create bridges between people, Black people who don't know each other, and who are at a level where they could develop fabulous things together.
Yeah.
But now we need to get the young ones to come and to see what is possible.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's remarkable. In fact, on this show, and Black and Borderless was created with that same kind of mission in mind, right? Connecting, you know, Black people who wouldn't otherwise cross paths and bringing them together. Like our viewers watching you now, there's someone in Atlanta who's never been to Marrakech, who's never, met or come across a Black French person who now has an opportunity to do that. So it's in that same spirit of connecting people. And I'm happy to hear that you're using the hotel space for that kind of an event. So when is the Diaspora Salon every year?
So we start. You can go on the diasporasalon.com to see what we have done in the past, see our press, make a donation to be sure that you have a space for next year, because we don't want it to turn into a festival and we know when we are going to stop. No one, we always, there's a wonderful African contemporary art fair called 154.
Mhm.
And 154, we start the last day of 154, so people can come for both.
Okay, okay, nice.
So next year, because of Ramadan, it was always in February, but then Ramadan is going to overlap. And the founder of 154 is doing it from the 17th to the 21st of March.
Mhm,
And we will do from the 21st to the 24th of March.
mhm, mhm.
So, yeah,
Awesome,
next
awesome,
year.
awesome. So viewers out there, if you're interested in, being a part of this event or somehow learning more about the Diaspora Salon, is there a website specifically for the Diaspora Salon
Yes.
our
Yes.
viewers can check out? Mhm,
So it's www
mhm.
dot the Diaspora Salon.
Okay.
Make sure you put the, otherwise you go to a hair salon, I think.
Very important. We don't want you to go to a hair salon and then you'll start
Yeah,
questioning us for
yeah.
sure. And then viewers, if some of you have been to this, please share your stories about it. So you talk about, this young person who talked about how the diaspora salon had impacted them. But I was reading on your LinkedIn page, you talked about how this has actually impacted you in a positive way too, in an unexpected way. Tell us a little bit about that. How has the diaspora salon actually transformed you?
Well, it's just like full circle, because then it just like, okay, for all these years I was doing this, and now it was to reach that. And I'm also developing a concept of a Black-owned boutique hotel brand. And so we are starting to raise equity for that. We have already created the company, though. And um, and when you see that, it's really a no-brainer. And the it's just like turning into a business model at a bigger scale, in the sense that we would have more locations, what we've been doing forever here in terms of creating a social buzz around a stay in a cool place,
Yeah.
social and intellectual buzz. And yeah, so I think that the what it has brought me is it's a very strong sense of purpose and intention
Mhm.
that was always there, but now is really very well defined.
I feel that when you talk about it. So this boutique brand that you're developing, this black-owned boutique brand, are you essentially talking about creating little Jnane Tamsnas in other parts of the world? And what are those kind of locations that you're scoping out now to expand into?
So we want to expand in Morocco first,
Okay.
and we have also identified other places which make our criteria is that it makes sense for diaspora interest, and it's already a very strong tourist um, destination.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is targeting the African diaspora and traveler at locations where they're already frequenting.
I'm going to say, for the moment, it's something that people might not be happy to hear, but um, African Americans are supporting Black owned businesses, and Africans are not yet doing it.
There are people on the continent who have, the middle class and the upper middle class who have the money, the funds to support, let me say, a luxury business like yours. But
But they
one could
don't.
argue that African Americans have much more disposable income to.
No, it's not a matter of money at all. I will just give you one example. Um, the And also, what we do is not. I mean, our clientele here is Caucasian a lot, and they love being mixed with us, the people coming here. So it's not, I'm not creating a product just for us. I'm creating a product where we own the narrative,
Mhm.
which is rooted in our culture. We'll have jazz musicians, authors, etc. But it is for everybody because the Black culture is the most popular in the world. It's just that we have not. I'm well placed to integrate it into a hospitality product because it's what I've been doing forever.
Yeah.
But it is for everybody.
Yeah.
And I will tell you something which I still bothers me. A few years ago, because for example, when African Americans come to Marrakech, if they are very wealthy and their standard is a classical 5-star, great, they would still come to my place and ask me to throw a birthday party for them or a dinner party. They want to support anyhow,
Mhm.
even if they are staying in places costing $2,000 a night.
Mhm.
If they know there's a Black owned business, they want to support.
Mhm. Mhm.
When people can't afford to stay where we are and they are in Airbnb or they have rented something, they also ask to organize something here because they want to support.
Mhm.
And the rest who can afford to stay here, they come.
Mhm.
Now, one year, and this is a very strong difference with, I'm half Senegalese, so, one year, there was this lovely woman, half Nigerian, half German, living in a medical doctor living in Geneva. She calls me, I mean, she contacts me privately through Instagram, and she said that she's in charge of organizing 50th birthday for a friend of hers who was from another African country. And she told me she's part of a group of 20 Africans, different countries, all of them in the corporate world in Switzerland, no diplomat. And she's in charge. So I told her, okay, the office will send you a quote, etc., etc. And then she calls me a week after having received the quote. And she was hysterical. In the meantime, we had spoken on the phone. And she told me, do you know what some of the people were saying? Oh, she's Senegalese. Do you think it's nice? Oh, she's Senegalese. Do you think it's not too expensive? And this is how people were thinking. And
Mhm.
we're talking about, educated people, right?
Mhm.
So it was at a moment where we just had Hugh Jackman stay here for the third time, the actor.
Mhm.
And I told her, there's nothing I can do. And I said, I feel sorry that people are still thinking like this when we're looking the same. And it was a battle for her to get them to come. This was like after COVID, like not long ago. So the birthday boy wanted to come, but since everybody was paying for their share, he was listening to everyone. They ended up coming and they had a great time. They had a great time. But I could see that they were a bit forced to come
Mhm.
because they're not used to imagining that an African owned product can be at such a level.
Yeah, I can see that. But I think we could spend like even maybe like another 30 minutes kind of talking about kind of the history of sub-Saharan Africa and why sub-Saharan Africans are not trusting of other sub-Saharan Africans in business, or why they think that a product created by another sub-Saharan Africa won't be of high quality. I think it comes with there's a lot of conditioning that's happened during the colonial era and even post that that thing has conditioned us to think that a fellow African cannot produce a product that is up to par with their European counterparts. And it's partially our responsibility to undo or to unlearn that kind of thinking. But I think it's going to take years for it to happen. In a place like the US, Black excellence, you're kind of surrounded by it, right? So I can name 3 examples of, you know, African Americans that I know that are doing really great things and creating really great products. So it's not as much of a mental leap, I think, for an African American to think a Black woman in Morocco can create this beautiful hotel experience for them. But for an African who's not used to seeing that from other Africans, where they come from countries where foreigners own lots of big
Hospitality.
hospitality things, it's a leap. So I think I agree with you, but I think I come from a place of empathy more than a place of um I think anger or offense, because I think it's really I think there's a mental shift that's happening. But I think places like yours now, those that group came to your place, right? And they left with probably a different perception of what an African yeah, a hotel owned by an African could be. So you're changing perceptions in that way. And I think if you look at it from that lens, you realize that you're making an impact. Yes, it's probably a headache, and it probably felt a little insulting that you
No, I really felt sorry for them. And also, it's very easy to go online and to find zillion things about me and to find the quality of people coming here. And so there was a lot of bad faith in not even wanting to do their homework, you know? So honestly, it didn't, I felt sorry for them.
I mean, this is a very hard conversation to have between people of color, but I think it's a necessary one about how we perceive other people of color who are producing products and how we rate those products based on the fact that they're people of color. So I think, with spaces that you're creating like that, I think we should have those hard conversations. Like in a space like the Diaspora Salon that you're creating, these are really hard topics. People don't want to talk about them because they don't want to offend people. They don't want, but I think we need to have for us to heal and for people in the diaspora to be able to connect truly, authentically. I think these conversations need to happen. And so I appreciate your candor. Some people would not want to say it because they don't want to offend, but I appreciate how honest you
Offend
are.
whom?
Yeah,
Offend whom?
yeah.
That's a fact. And since I have white hair, I've decided to say what I want to who I want. Period. And no one calls me auntie also. So, it's not offending. I mean, it's a fact. I'm just saying that African Americans, at least the ones I've always met, support and trust the possibility of quality made by other African Americans. And the West Indians have been also on that side, I have to say. When they hear that there's a woman from West Indies, I have felt, and it's not a matter of money because very often, especially French West Indies, they don't have the kind of means that people can have in Africa or in the US, but they are also full of good faith, wanting to know about it. And, yeah.
I think it's changing. I think the perception in Africa is changing for the better. I think people are realizing that great products can come out of people from the continent. So I would say I'm optimistic about it. I think in 10 years, you probably wouldn't have this complaint. And I think that's a nice segue actually to talk about what I want to talk about next, which is Morocco isn't without its stories about discrimination against women and against people of color, or against, let's say, Black people specifically. Most recently in the African Cup event that was held in Morocco, there were stories about Black people, mainly sub-Saharan African, experiencing racism, right? I believe, and don't quote me exactly, I think my viewers could better quote this story, but of people having bananas thrown at them, implying that there were monkeys. The Senegalese team and kind of, the conflict between the Senegalese and the Moroccan team during the African Cup also caused some conflict that led to some racist incidents. So I think for you, the question I have is that number one, has that been your experience in Morocco in any way, shape, or form? Have you experienced racism in any way, shape, or form? And if so, how have you kind of navigated that?
I don't, it in very minor ways, with in places where people wouldn't know me, for example, in an administration, you can see when someone is looking at who is going to be taken care of behind you if someone looks like different. You know, this has happened to me in France too, but the person really regretted doing this. I'm not, the thing is that because I don't feel that I'm in a position where I cannot just bang on the table and say, "Stop doing this immediately." Um, I have not been. I'm not the. I have not been suffering too much from racism. Otherwise, I would not have been able to do all of these successful uh, projects.
Mhm.
And if it happens, I can just ignore it. Uh, but I know that it's because I'm in a position where I can afford to ignore it.
Mhm.
I know that sometimes in a bank there could be some people where I can feel some jealousy. I know that sometimes um, there's some employees who could be a bit, you can feel it when people are not so happy to see you in the position where you are. But it really remains minor when it comes to me. It may not be minor when it comes to other people. And I'm not surprised if people, the thing about football and things like that, it is spaces which unleashed very often the worst of people. Even if it's between two white countries, you could have hooligans, you could have violence. So it's what happened during the football thing is horrible, but at the same time, I don't excuse it at all. But I would be worried if it was happening in other fields than football. I expect violence in this kind of big games. I expect nastiness because you have a lot of people going there who want to be violent and insult the others, and so it's too bad that it is being taken as an example of a deep racism. It is an expression of a deep racism,
Mhm.
certainly. But it could have happened in another country. For example, I'll give you an example. Brazil, for me, is the most racist country in the world. I know Brazil very well. I've been there zillion times.
Mhm.
And people say, "Oh, how do you say that?" I say, "Yeah, well, look, in September, I was there in September and I was there again in November. If I go to visit friends in fancy building, the watchman at the entrance still tells me staff entrance on the right.
Wow.
Okay. And I was in Sao Paulo, and this I think is much deeper. It's a much deeper structure mind of like people don't belong here than people insulting each other on a football game. Um, I remember I went to visit a friend of mine I hadn't seen in 40 years in Sao Paulo. She lives in a very fancy building. And at there's just like in a hotel, when you enter, there's a counter and very nicely dressed concierge. And she was on the 20th floor, and on the fifth floor, there was a birthday party for a 5-year-old. And
Mhm.
the concierge asked me, "What children are you coming to pick up?"
Wow.
You know? And so I think that the set of mind is that the Black people are in a position of service in
Yeah.
their mind.
Mhm.
And this is for me a much, much pervert way of being racist, you know?
Yeah. It's almost like I think it could be the same as what we call microaggression here
Yeah,
in
it
the
is
US.
definitely a microaggression, but
It's
it
somewhat.
is definitely a microaggression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yes, I see what you're saying about this football event, right? Yes. Generally, people in sports, people, trash talk, right? That's kind of the fun of it. But in that sense, it went a little too far because it wasn't just an attack on the athletic ability of a team, but on the identity of a team. And which is ironic because you're actually, like as you said, you're part Senegalese, right? How, did you feel anything seeing, I mean, the Senegalese team kind of at odds with the Moroccan team? Or again, did you dismiss it as
No, I was very proud that they won, but I didn't follow the match at all. But I also think that in football I think it was in the Italian team that they had a brilliant African player, and the crowd was calling him monkey in Italy. I mean, these are I don't want to say anything about football fans, but it happens in football stadiums. much more than in the amphitheater of a university, for example, when you could have 1,000 people listening to a professor and there's also black students. I don't
Yeah.
think they're being called monkeys there, you know?
Yeah. No, racism comes in many forms. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's explicit. But I think what we're kind of saying is kind of the same thing, which is that it could happen in many places. I think what just kind of struck me with it happening in Morocco is that Morocco is a part of the African continent.
Recently, I was speaking to a Swiss travel agent who was telling me that his Moroccan clients are not interested in traveling in Africa. They like traveling in Europe, like traveling in the US or in Latin America, but they're not interested in doing safaris and things like that.
Mhm.
So I thought, this is maybe translating a certain non-interest for the country, for the continent. I don't know. And he told me he always suggests phenomenal, safaris and very luxurious thing. They're not interested.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something which could be, you know, uh, talked about. I don't know, but it's true that yes, a lot of people. I would say Moroccans often think that forget that they are on this continent. Also,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely.
So I think we've had enough talk about all of kind of the not so good things that culturally that one could experience. I want to talk about what you know the next 20 years look like for you and this thing that you're building, right? First, before we get there, let's reflect a little bit. So, what do you think the version of yourself who left France, many years ago would say about the life you built today, Marrakech?
Well, I think that she would say it's beyond her wildest dreams because I knew when since I was a kid, I wanted to be an architect since I was 10 or something like that. So for me, moving to Morocco was, first of all, being able to live off what I liked the most to do, you know? And I'm lucky because there's a lot of people, they don't, they can do one thing or another, but it's not so so important for them. And this was my first thing. There, I can create. After that, everything else which came was a bonus. Everything else which came, and 10 times, 100 times more things came, was a bonus connected to the way we designed the life of the hotel. So I think that I would say to my young self, um, believe that things are possible. But I cannot think that I can't remember a moment where things seemed to be me impossible. Even when people would tell me, "Are you nuts? You are leaving your career." And I had won a very prestigious award in France as a young lawyer. And my friends were telling me, "Oh, you won this award and you're leaving being a lawyer to be a what in Marrakech? An innkeeper?" You know? And and now when they come to visit, they say, "Oh, you definitely made the right choice." But it is true that my young self, when I think about it, I was probably quite fearless.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what advice would you give to any Black woman looking to start in the hospitality space like you in Africa?
What I would give is that, the situation, because of colonialism, Africa, African countries, I'm not talking about Egypt, for example, because it has the pyramids, but the rest of the African countries were reduced. The interest of traveling there was reduced to wildlife and beaches because in the colonial mentality, we didn't have culture. And if we had culture, it would not justify what they were doing there also, you know? So I think that the most important thing is to realize that we have a very strong urban culture. And if a woman wanted to get into hospitality, I would be doing things in the city because and having access to the art galleries, the music of the city, all sorts of things. Because, for example, if I'm going to, um, I don't know, if I was to go to Kenya, which is known for the fabulous beaches it has and all the safaris. I did a safari when I was a teenager with my parents. I'm done. I don't need to see other lions or giraffe. I can see this on my screen. It's fine. Um, I love the beach part when it has culture, like a place like Lamu with beautiful old architecture. But what I would be the most interested in is discovering the urban culture of Nairobi, you know? So this is the advice I would give to young black women who want to get into hospitality. Create something unique which will be about the connection with the urban culture, because nature, we've had it.
Mhm.
No, I'm totally for nature, but it's a very much of a colonial discourse.
Mhm.
We are beyond wildlife and beaches.
Mhm.
So for me, an ideal trip would be, let's say, 10 days in Kenya, 4 days in Lamu, which has culture and beaches, and then the rest of the time, 6 days in Nairobi, you
Wow.
know?
Mhm.
And I think this is something that can happen in other countries too.
Yeah.
We need to invest in our modern culture.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, I think we don't talk about that enough, right? That urban Africa is just as much a part of our identities now as, the atypical rural, natural space. And both are valid and both need to be expressed through our hospitality spaces in some way.
Yes. Yes.
So, before we go, Marianne, we're gonna play a little fun game. We call it borderless banter, but it's basically we'll give you a sentence and you kind of fill in the blank. And it's a way for you to look ahead and kind of tell us what you think, the legacy you want to leave, essentially. So I'll give you a sentence and then you fill in the blank of that sentence. In 20 years, Jnane Tamsna will be the what of the African hospitality industry?
In terms of boutique industry, I would love it to be the pioneering reference.
That's fair. In my eyes, it already is, but I think it's it's humble of you to make you to think that that's your goal for the decade. I think you've already achieved that goal, in my humble opinion. Um, in 10 years, Marrakech will be the what for people of African descent.
Oh, Marrakesh will be for the world. It is already for the world, so including those of African descent. Marrakesh is in this very particular position that it has been a historical crossroad of so many things, you know. I and it is now having 20. Morocco is having 20 million tourists. I think that what is incredible is that here, even though we now have the big food brands, the American ones that we all know of, um, the culture remains very strong. And I think that it could become an example of a place where on the continent you are into urban culture, and no matter how many fast food might be around, you still have your culture first.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't mean that the culture is in stone, is totally fossilized.
Mhm.
It evolves within its own roots and it's within its own frame.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's great. I've actually never been, but I've heard that feedback from people who have visited Marrakech. I'm sure some of our viewers have too. So if you've ever visited, kind of drop a comment and tell us if you agree with Marianne's account of Marrakech and its legacy and kind of its ability to retain culture despite the invasion of American
Sure.
fast food brands.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, it's not an invasion like you would see, I don't know, in Florida or something, but they're all there.
Yeah,
Yeah, all there.
yeah, yeah. So that's fair. So lastly, let's talk about your legacy as a person, Maryanne, right? So you have this hotel that you've built, this brand you've built. What do you hope your legacy will be? If you were not here tomorrow, what do you want people to say about you? And I want to say specifically people of African descent, because that's our audience, right? What do you want your legacy to be in the diaspora?
Yeah, I never think about this because I move every day. I move, and I don't take, you know, the distance to think about that. Um, I guess that I would like people to think that um I was fearless, and that f- impossible was not a word part of my vocabulary. While being very realistic, I just set myself goals which might seem complicated for other people, but I know that it's achievable. And I think also that uh, it would be the reality is that people can be a mix of a lot of things culturally without suffering from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be the most positive thing. It's like making the most of what you are,
Mhm,
because you're not going to change that.
mhm.
And I think that I would like to be seen as a very cosmopolitan, fearless Black woman.
Well, thank you, Marianne. This has been awesome. And I think that's a great place for us to kind of stop, a good mic drop moment for us. This has been an incredible conversation for me,
Thank you.
really to have.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.